I was in a really rough spot. My dad dropped a book on me, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. That book was super complex. I read it every day and I didn't understand probably half the words that this guy was using. But that book absolutely changed my life. It just gave me a completely different perspective of the why. Why go to school? Why, all these things, you don't understand them. What it gave me was a reason for living. And that reason for living was in giving.
Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 141. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Before I get into it, if you like this show or any other shows, please share it. We're trying to get some more exposure around this. Today's guest, just like a random connection on LinkedIn. A mutual friend of ours, Mr. Laval St. Germain. That's kind of our paths are intertwined. So I'm really curious. We've met once sitting on 17th Ave, and I could tell there was something, you had a story. So please name and who you are.
My name's Gordon Breault, Speakers Canada. Speakers Bureau of Canada. Technically, we run out of Calgary. And there's a team of 12 is who we are. And, we were basically an agent for public speakers. I took the business over from my father, and we used to be the Speakers Bureau of Alberta. So a lot of roots to Calgary, a lot of roots of Alberta. And yeah, just happy to be here. Appreciate being on the list and joining your company.
Yeah, man, this will be a fun one just because, when we briefly met up, your story before this, it's going to be really interesting to just hear it, like kind of start to finish. So walk this thing back, take it back as far as you want to go, how you grew up, where you grew up, parents, siblings, interests, and we'll just kind of like school, jobs, and we'll weave our way to where you are today and just, hear the entire thing.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, my dad, I'll start with the business. I think it's a good place to start, and then I'll kind of go back into my story. But my dad, he's people know him, like he's a legend, and he's done so much work in the community in Calgary and Alberta as a whole, nonprofits. He was a fundraiser, and I really would like to showcase my dad as he's been the founder of me being here in the first place. But yeah, we were born and raised in Calgary. My dad grew up, he lived in Canmore. Where else did he live? Medicine Hat, and had a kid in each city. So he had I'm the youngest. I'm the youngest in Calgary. Okay. 2 older brothers. Okay. My dad, basically, he was doing fundraising and all this type of stuff, but put us in sports. Kind of the regular type of upbringing up until about 12. But family a little dysfunctional. Going to kind of start there. The family a little dysfunctional.
Did you know it at the time, or did you?
We had no clue. Like we kind of on the outside, it was a lot of the same things, like go to church, this type of stuff, go play sports and all these things. But back home, there's just, other than my dad, like with my mom, there was just not that much communication that was going on. And so back in those days, it was a lot of tough love as well. There was kind of the end of the boomer era where it was tough love and that type of thing. So we got through that as a family all in different ways. And that's why, my older brother, he's been on his own since he was 14. Wow. I've been on my own since I was 14. But luckily, we've kind of weaving our way through it. Everything's healed now, but there's definitely a lot of things that happened along the way that brought me back into where we are. So really, really cool. Like my middle brother, he started wind sport. He just went down a completely different path. He's really well known in the sports community in Calgary, and he's still doing a lot of foundational work, coaching, and those types of things there. My older brother, he did a lot of work with the homeless. So he did a lot of work in nonprofits, but also just kind of getting people off the streets, struggling with addictions and those types of things. My path, following that step, I kind of rebelled a little bit and not really finding myself, not knowing my identity. And, with that, brought back into, I don't know how I can say this, just getting into trouble and kind of going down the wrong path. But luckily I had an older brother who was kind of guiding people away from that. And then my dad also kind of came in at the end and saved everything. So even though things were really hard, we've always had a family support, which is really interesting. And now that we're older, we've weaved that all back in.
Being by yourself at a young age, it's you learn a lot quick. I can't imagine what you learn, but to figure a lot out at a young age, Before that though, it's pretty like standard. You kind of touched on it. It was kind of like tough love and just kind of like
like we played a lot of sports. Sorry to jump in. We played a lot of sports. So like me and my middle brother were like really into sports. My mom was really into music. So like there's this other side of us that's like big on music. We were very stable in that sense, like typical middle class family, but forced to go to Catholic church and forced into music. If you didn't do music, you couldn't play sports. And so there's this kind of like thing going on that where we couldn't figure out as kids. All three of us really couldn't figure it out of the why we were doing things, I guess is the best things. We knew what we liked, but the why we were doing things is kind of the big question. Yeah.
Was it pretty like school and sports were pretty, it's like you said it earlier, like kind of like a normal upbringing, you know, just like normal-ish, just like, but normal activities.
Yeah, normal activities. I mean, like we did some pretty cool stuff. Like we drove across the country in a van. You know, my parents are from a little small town, Cornwall, Ontario. So they both came out west at 20 years old. Okay. So we have a lot of friends, like family friends, all the way across from here to Ontario, obviously, and then up north as well. They lived in Edmonton for a long period of time. So we've spent a lot of our lives going up and back and forth between Edmonton, camping trips, you know, driving trips, and I think we went down to Seattle a couple times, like just doing the family stuff, you know, back then especially, like I think the Voyager came out, you know, that brown Voyager. So yeah, exactly. Like, and so my parents took full advantage of that and just had us going hard. And, but yeah, like, you know, my pretty cool stuff. Like my brother was really good at hockey. So I was the goalie, you know, and so he forced me to be a goalie. Well, I ended up being a goalie, you know, same with like back catching. Like my brother was a back catcher, and so he got me to become a back catcher, and we would play. Then he would pitch, and obviously pitch to me. So a lot of the stuff that I look back on now were very much in leadership roles. I just didn't even know them at the time, and I was groomed to kind of become a person from a leadership perspective, being able to manage things. And so I really appreciate those qualities that my parents brought me from a foundational perspective of, you know, forcing me into these positions that are not typical, and you know, that are usually managing other people to some degree. Yeah.
14. What's going on at 14? The kind of thing started changing for you.
Yeah, 14 I think is a funny age, isn't it? Especially for boys, you know. I think you start, you know, you could go to junior high, you're coming out of junior high, you're kind of figuring that stuff all out. It kind of started happening around 12, I would say, you know, once you start hitting puberty and you're trying to figure out like, I'm supposed to be this man, you know, what does that look like? What's that definition? That's kind of where it all started. But, you know, I got to see my older brother also go through the same thing that I went through. And that was kind of where the knowledge came from both our sides. My mom already had went through it with one son. So, and they're doing the best they can, you know, and she already went through it with one son. So her way of handling it with me was, okay, well, we're going to try to stop that. Versus, you know, now I got to see my brother go through it. And he's telling me, well, don't do this and don't do that, and this is what you need to be doing. So you're trying to find, like, as a young person, and like my dad also has a degree in philosophy. So my dad had me like questioning things like really young of like, why are you here? What, you know, is the chair in the room or do you just see the chair? You know, those types of questions, and a little bit too young maybe to be questioning those types of things. But you know, just a very curious mind and a high energy kid, and, you know, wanting to know more. And once I figured out kind of how things work, like, hey, you know, we're in church and it doesn't make sense for us why we're just continuously at church. And meanwhile, this is actually what's going on at home. Or why are we going to church and we're giving this money? And meanwhile, we don't have a whole bunch of money. And so it's just a very kind of those questions going on at a really young age, and a lot for parents to handle. Like I was bad. I just want to come out there and say that I was not an angel either. And so, you know, I made a lot of really shitty choices, and the people that I choose to hang out with, I started shifting away from that sports group into these other people who come from a dysfunctional family. And so I found love there, even though it wasn't, I found out later for it not to really be real love. What
do you think that, like that decision, like what do you think that like trigger was to go from like this, you know, kind of sport, school, church, this kind of traditional thing to all of a sudden something switches and you kind of go the opposite way?
I think that it has to do with, like, it's a really good question. I think it really has to do with the identity, one thing, loss of self-esteem is another thing. Like if you don't know who you are and why, like that question, right? Obviously, I think that's a constant thing anyways. But once you get into your self-esteem and you're trying to figure out like, well, I'm different in some ways. We also have a disease in our family, which is genetic. My father's like right now, he's in a wheelchair. And so that is also plays a big role because the way that our family operated, we had to deal with that. So it's like my dad, it's a very slow burning disease where you basically lose part of your strength and muscle over time. So we had to deal with that as children and going, well, you have to limit yourself. You can't do this. I think that's where a lot of my energy comes from. But you can't do this. You can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. And so, like for example, you shouldn't be running a marathon. You shouldn't be doing that school marathon. I think it's like 3K or something like that. You shouldn't be doing that. And then meanwhile, I'd go and I'd finish 5th. And so it's like, well, should I not be doing that? It doesn't make sense, right? And so those are the kind of problems that happen in that sense. But also with my father alone, it was tough because you have to watch him deteriorate over time. Like it's like one day he can't run, the next day he can't jump, the next day he can't lift his kid up, and then he can't throw a baseball. So just like over time to watch that and watch the emotional pain that comes with that is something that it's not normal. Yeah.
And then do you just feel yourself like pulling back, and then this other group of people is just like giving you energy that you can, like they're giving you that, like they're propping you up a little bit. You're like, oh, this is.
I think I call it like trauma bonding. I think like there's a lot of that. Like I think there's a lot of like, poor me in that age. Like poor me, this is what my life's like. These other people may not understand. And like, I'm so grateful for all the people because there have a lot of help over the years from people from the sports that were trying to pull me back into the right direction. But then you just don't have a commonality of some of those things. And so the commonality felt like love and understanding because I felt like nobody understood me. So I think that, but I think it's also some bad decision making. Like I have to own that. Like you have all these people that are driven and are on the right path and have that family support. And I think that there's some envy there where you're kind of going like, hey, like my family should be like this. And so you also kind of feel a lack of that. But then those people were the people who are trying to help me the most. So those are like I hold those, even though I don't talk to many of them still, I still hold them very, very dearly, those relationships. And it's just hard to pinpoint like a moment. But you can definitely tie relation to it over time going, well, I'm more like this person than I am like that. It's
a lot to digest at a young age.
Very.
Like having these, like the duality of these things, like all these thoughts and the feelings, the relationship at home. Like it's a lot when you feel like you don't fit in at a young age. It's a lot to digest.
100%. And like, I think like anybody who doesn't fit in, like we're all human beings. We all want to fit in. We all want purpose. We want to feel acknowledged for what we do and why we do them, right? I think like over time, it also helped build me to where I am now. I mean, like I wouldn't change it for anything. But at the same time too, if I think all of our jobs as well is not to repeat patterns. So if I had a child, I would also want to raise my child differently. But yeah, definitely, it's like it's a very, very interesting thing. And being young, you don't know, like at 14 years old, you think you know the world. And now I look back and like look at myself when I'm 22 and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, right, man. Like it wouldn't even take myself serious now.
It's so interesting that you're thinking about all these things at such this, like, it's a crazy age. And like you said, it could have gone down this path where you and I wouldn't be sitting here, right?
100%.
And that changes I find pretty fascinating, where it's like, whatever the thing was, we'll get to it, but like something shook you to put you on this different path. But easily, a lot of people will stay on that path and just the way it goes.
Really quick, like and like I wish I had a timetable to just see all the people that I knew, good and bad, just where they are. Like where are they today? And I don't think like many of the people that I followed that I still like had to actually make a decision to consciously not hang out with them anymore. I think like those people, like, the typical dead in jail, that type of thing. But yeah, like I've always known that I was different.
When you said it twice now.
Yeah.
What were you like thinking or feeling back then and at the time you can't really say you're different. You just,
yeah.
Why? Well, what made you different?
Yeah. It's hard to say, whether I hung out with, again, just not fitting in. And like, I kind of have this theme in my life where I learn things backwards, the hard way, but just not fitting in. Like even with the bad kids or whatever you want to call them, I was still positive, I was still a positive person. I was still very optimistic. I've always been a hugely optimistic person, even through really hard times, super optimistic. And so when you're hanging out with people who maybe want to look at everything negatively, and they want to look at things like, no, we're just, we're just bad, and that's the way we're supposed to be. Like those people, I didn't fit in with that attitude either. But then I also didn't fit in with an attitude of, hey, everything's just great and be positive and everything's going to be great. I think I've always just fell in between those, and that in between has really been a big advantage, I think. But when I look back at that time at 14, you don't know what that means. No. You don't know what that is. So I think I don't want to use the word like eccentric or anything like that because it's not really describes me, but always been high energy, optimistic, and realistic at the same time. And then also from the positivity side, in contrast, I'm also been really able to deal with really hard conversations and go through hard times. And I don't look at the hard times of defining me. I look at the outcome of what it's producing. So I don't know, it's been really weird. But I think that comes from my dad's philosophy degree. He's just been such an amazing mentor to me in that sense. And he's just been able to present so many different ideas, whether I was ready for them or not, but so many different ideas of how to think. Yeah.
Rolling into high school. What's
high school?
What is the young high school version of you look like?
Yeah, not good. I mean, high school. I lasted about a year, and so St. Francis. We went to St. Francis High School. So there's at that time like not many high schools in the Northwest. There's like 2,500 kids. CB's drive-in and all this stuff, and like very much a football orientated high school. Because of my disease, like I really wanted to play sports and things like this. But then sometimes I'd make the team, sometimes I wouldn't make the teams. It was just this kind of like I said, like just being in the in-between of everything all the time. Went to high school, lasted about a year. They had a program there for kids like me where you would get invited in and then you're 3 strikes and you're out. And so if you missed a class, if you talk back to a teacher, anything that if you left the property, they'd get you out of there. So, me and a bunch of the kids that I knew, we would last maybe about six months, maybe at the most. I think I lasted 6 months the first year, and then the second year was about 3 months. So didn't make it very long. But then, once I started getting into trouble, that's when my dad kind of stepped in a little stronger place. It took me a while to get it, but I ended up doing all my high school correspondence, and I did all of it in about a year and a half. So once I actually applied myself, it was done. But it was just a matter of actually getting me focused into, being like, you don't think the value, again, you're like, what is it's a high school, all this stuff. But holy, like it's a very, very important role in my life to sit down and apply myself. And I had a lot of who you hang out with. So like some people don't care about school. A lot of the kids that I hung out with didn't care about school. But once I started hanging out with kids that said, hey man, like you can do this. I'm doing, I started with math 14. I hate math. And they started with math 14. And then once I started hanging out with kids that cared, they'd be like, come over to math 10 pure. We'll just help you. So we just kind of who you hang out with is a big, big part of that.
Were you working in high school?
I was working. My first job was at Grandma Lee's slanging sandwiches. So that was amazing. I worked at Dairy Queen, and then I also did a lot of odd jobs. Like I would work on I forget the name of the company, Diversify. I would do tons of like just odd jobs, like going to do construction and those types of things. So I've been working since a very young age, and
because you had to, like because you were independent pretty young, so you had to like...
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like I had friends that I had stayed with, but then you still need to provide for yourself. So it's like, you just learn different ways and creative ways to make money, whether that be sometimes doing the wrong things, but you know, at the same time too, you know that you need consistency to make money as well. So out of survival, you still like, we always had jobs, and you know, until I was like in a really bad spot and I was addicted to drugs, that's when things really took for a bad turn. But up until that point, yeah, from 14 till about 17, I was working part-time at the very least, sometimes in the summers full-time. Yeah, yeah.
Which, it's kind of interesting, right? Like to be learning all this at a young age, you know, like to be independent at a young age, knowing that you got to like provide for yourself. So you got to find a job, you got to make sacrifices.
Yeah.
It's a lot to...
It's a lot, you know, you grow up quick, you become a man really fast. But, you know, my dad is one of the hardest workers I know. Again, my brothers are two of the most hardest working people that I know. We just have this work ethic. And I think a lot of it comes like, you know, going back, and we'll get into that later, but you're always trying to prove yourself. So sometimes, you know, you're realizing you're trying to prove it to other people. But once you do it over time, you're proving it to yourself. And then once you've proved it, you kind of go like, why do I need to prove it anymore anyways? But that's kind of like what where that work ethic came from, is you just don't feel good enough. So you're like, oh, okay, like I got to provide, I got to make sure that I am adequate, and very, very important skill to have. Like I wouldn't trade that for the world either. I think it's super, super important to instill hard work ethic, especially being from Alberta. You know, I think that we all kind of get hard work ethic, and you can work your way. You might not be the smartest, but you can work your way through it, you know, and I still believe that to this day. Yeah.
Coming out of high school.
Coming out of high school.
Yeah, what does that look like?
So a little
you
bit.
Finished it.
Yeah. We'll do high school quick. Yeah. We'll do high school quick.
High school is a rough time.
High school was a rough time. High school was really where I got into the most trouble. So like those years, 16, 17, that was really I got to the most. I started doing hard drugs. I used to just like smoke weed, just like, you know, get drunk on weekends, and then started getting into hard drugs. And that's when things really took a turn for my life. I completely lost myself, lost my identity, didn't care about anything, didn't care about myself. Super sad, like worst, you know, most embarrassing time in my life, obviously, but, you know, lost a lot of friends, lost, you know, even had some run-ins with the law, and luckily it happened all then, you know, but once I got through that, you know, I ended up kind of being on probation. That's when my dad stepped in, and that was like a pivotal moment. So
did he try earlier? Like, did he try while you were kind of in the thralls of this, like...
You always try, like you're trying, like you don't want to be bad. Like I really don't think that people want to be bad. And if they do want to be bad, they might, you know, you might want to go to a mental institution and get checked out. Like if you're idolizing those things, something's missing in your life. And no judgment, you know, everybody has their own story and path to where they get to where they go. But you know, looking back on my time, my dad tried to integrate numerous times. My mom was still around. She was super supportive, like just so blessed to have a family that even if it was dysfunctional, supportive, loving, wanting the best thing for you. Once you get into hard drugs, it really can like misconstrued everything that you think about the world and yourself. And that's why they're so dangerous, because usually you're doing that in your lowest point. You're doing that in a really place of like no purpose, no identity, nothing to care about. And so when you don't have anything to care about, that's a dangerous place to live. And so that was kind of where my high school brought me. And that was when, obviously at a young age as well, like people who are 17 years old and they hear, hey, Gord's out there doing hard drugs, X and X and X. I don't expect them to be relationships at this point in time in my life, because there's a lot of judgment that comes then. I have this theme where I say I learned everything backwards, and it's true. I learned everything backwards. I'm very grateful again that happened to me at a young age, because a lot of the people that I ended up associating with at 25, 26, they started their drug journey at that time. Well, I won't, like where I'm at, I don't even come close to it, right? And so it's very, very lucky that way. But my dad, again, he's integrated numerous times, but I didn't have the environment with the will at the same time. They never clicked. They clicked at 19. And 19.
You just knew that you needed to like snap out of this, or something?
My dad, I was in a really rough spot. I had just started caring about high school and just started associating with smarter people. And my dad dropped a book on me, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And that book was super complex. and it's like, it's huge, massive book. And it took me about a month and a half to read it. And I read it every day, and I didn't understand probably half the words that this guy was using. But that book absolutely changed my life. It just gave me a completely different perspective of the why. And, you know, you, again, as a young person, hey, why are we giving money to the church? Why go to school? Why, you know, all these things, you don't understand them. So that book, what it gave me was a reason for living. And that reason for living was in giving. And so I don't know if you know the book or if you're familiar with it. The book goes through Viktor Frankl, who's living in Auschwitz, which is one of the concentration camps. And he's a psychiatrist. He's not a doctor, but they assign him to become a doctor of the camp, the most qualified person to be the camp. And he would analyze to see how people would lose their lives. And so it was a big camp. And so every day that there was, you know, all these people who are living on their last meal, literally, if you don't eat, you could die. And so what he noticed was, as the doctor, was that people would come in, and as soon as they heard bad news from the outside world, such as their wife dying, you know, their grandma dying, their mother dying, or whatever, as soon as they did that, they'd stop eating. 2 days later, they'd die. So what he started doing was every morning there was a shift. And, you know, long story short, there's a lot more other things, but there's a shift work where you would have to run to go get shoes and get those shoes. And if you got those shoes, you would go work. And if you go work, then all of a sudden you get to eat an extra meal. So what he started doing was waking up every morning at 6 a.m. to run, to go get a pair of shoes. He'd go bring those pair of shoes to the person who lost somebody recently, who got that bad news. And then those people would go work that day. And that little bit saved lives. And that's his whole study. And he reanalyzed and rewrote this book from a psychology perspective. Wow. So absolutely amazing. And so that meaning to me is so important, because that's who my dad is. My dad has been just one of the most giving people, not even just to us, but to other people. His whole career is based off fundraising and giving things away. So, you know, it just kind of just hit home. And once that happened, I said, you know, I'm being selfish. I'm the one who's making all these decisions. I'm doing this all for me. I'm wondering about my why. What about all these other people's whys? Why am I so focused on mine? And maybe my why is in other people. And it's really interesting to see that play out, because all my brothers are in like these like similar positions of like relationship management. And yeah, we're all really good at managing things with other people that are hard. So anyways, yeah. Interesting.
A book.
Yeah.
A book is like
the one flip. Yeah, that started it. That's the thinking, right? In order to change your behavior, it starts with the thinking. And if you don't have a purpose, what do you have? You have to have a purpose in order to change your thinking. You can tell me to write this way, the same way 50 times, but if I don't have a purpose to change why I write, we're gonna have to wait for some incident to happen that you weren't clear, so I can clarify this is why you write this way. So everybody has to kind of have that moment of clicking, you know? So the first is thinking. Next is gonna be, you know, how you're appropriating your behavior related to your thinking. And so you have to match that up. But, you know, I'm a true believer of environment. I don't think that it's just a biological thing. I think that like so much of what we do is based off our environment. And my environment at those times was self-inflicted, very constraining. And so I had to relearn how to reopen my environment. And just again, thank God my dad provided that. Yeah.
Wild. Where did that book take you after you read it? Like if that was the kind of the first step of like, you know, trying to figure out the environment and the unlock, then what starts happening after that?
Yeah, amazing. My dad, again, kind of just brought me in. Yeah, exactly. Hey? Dad. Pops just came in at every single level. And so he's the one who gave me the book. And then he realized that he couldn't control me. So my parents split up when I was 19. And that was pivotal, because now my dad could start doing, I got to know my dad. you know? And so nothing against my mom, you know, but it was just, that was the environment of, I got to know my dad. My dad basically let me do anything I wanted and just said, don't bring your shit back on me. And that was a life lesson in itself. My dad has been also tough loving. It's not like he's just open arms. When I've gotten in trouble, he'll put it right back on me and say, hey, you go follow that. You got a day here. You go figure that out. Same with I had to pay rent at his place at a very young age. As soon as I was 19, I was paying rent at my dad's. It was $800 a month. Like it wasn't like it wasn't like a $200 like it was like, you're living with me, you're paying. So it forced you to get a job. You know, it forced me. So I did like some pretty cool stuff. Like I did. I started off doing like some weird stuff. I did, what was it, like perennials and things like this. I do a lot of seasonal work, and I'd like line those up in some nurseries and things like this. I like doing outside labor, but I realized I couldn't do that either. And so on the flip side of this, I've been going to events since I was 11. My dad's been bringing me to speaking events and like been around his business and whatnot. And so he was the one who proposed to me. He's like, why don't you start a business at 19? So we looked at his network, and, you know, he has a disability. We had a large access to people of people who face disability. So I started a disability services, caregiving services business. At the time, you didn't need it to be an RN. So, you know, I had gone to school. I went to Mount Royal. I had done a part-time little business degree.
No, you went to post-secondary.
Post-secondary. I didn't go to every class. I graduated, but I didn't go to every class. Yeah, I graduated. I have a little tiny business degree. It was just like a part-time 3 times a week thing. But did that, and then started a caregiving business. That kind of propelled me. I did really well with that, surprisingly. But it was like really grunt work. Like you're doing a lot of like care, you know, going back to that care and giving type of thing. And so my dad guided me on that as well. Like, you know, set up the company. It was a small little AB enterprise, we called ourselves. I built that up into 4 employees at one point in time at a very young age. And I think we almost had, like, we could have doubled up and taken over. But then I just burnt out. And I did that from 21 until 26.
Oh, wow. So
I did that for a big chunk. Yeah, I did that for a big chunk. And that's like a big part of my life, was that part of my life, because you're still fighting your identity. I had all these people that I still was attracted to. You're still a young person. You don't think that, you know, this person may be bad for you. You don't even want to think of people like that. You know, you go, oh no, I've known that guy for 10 years. He's solid, you know, that type of stuff. And, you know, it was a hard transition for me to understand, again, to recognize my difference. Like, do I belong with this class of person? Am I this type of person? That identity crisis still kind of lived through. And so the consistency is the work, and the consistency was the business, and the consistency was the structured of what I had to do for myself. And even though I had my dad, he still forced me to do everything myself. So that was the consistency. And all these other pieces were continuously tried to be pieced together, whether that's social life, girlfriend, whatever that is. But again, like, you know, I lived with my dad from 20 until 19 until 21. And I've been living on my own since then. So, you know, good credit that said, you got to get the hell out of here. My dad's the one who said that, you got to get the hell out of here. So you think all these things that are like, that sound kind of mean when you come off on it, were just the best things for me. And
The like running that business for so long, did it feel like, did you have a sense of purpose? Did you like the giving aspect, or did you like the consistency that you knew you needed to show up at these certain times? Like, what was it about that job that kind of kept you in it?
I think it, like, one is that I never had anything. So I never actually had something that was mine. I think that still speaks today, that this is something as part of my identity. And a lot of people will try to say, like, don't get your identity mixed up with your business. And like, if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, that's your identity for that portion of your life. And so that's kind of the way I looked at it. But, you know, that's one thing, is ownership and control. And it's something that I could attribute to my success. 2 would be the giving aspect, and going back and saying, look, like, we have all this access to these people. I can go out there and service and make money from it. So that was another thing. But that's a very hard industry.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody. You're dealing with some hard conversations regularly, hardest times in their lives. And then managing people in that business is even harder because if they don't show up, somebody's life's depending on that. And so that's really, kind of where the concept of reliability and being accountable and showing up, even if you're not at your best, just showing up, making sure you're there, that those qualities lived instilled. But yeah, very, very interesting job. But at 27, I had to keep going back and filling in for people.
Right.
And when they weren't showing up, that was tiring.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's an 11 o'clock phone call, that's tiring, So I just kind of lost it by doing those employees. And then they implemented a law where you had to become an RN. And I said, do I want to go do this? And I just said, no, let's just sell it. So, I sold it for a pretty nice penny and went on a year hiatus traveling. Yeah.
Did you, you're making some business decisions at a pretty young age, whether it's like, how to stand the thing up, have staff, and then to decide to sell it, right? These are all, you may have had this piece of paper from Mount Royal, but you learned a lot of like real business lessons pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, accounting was probably the most valuable course out of there. A lot of the stuff that I learned was basically streets and is from survival state and like making high pressure decisions and then having good, like I learned how to bounce ideas off people really young. That was like a big skill. And I still promote that to this day. The answers are all around us. Yeah. It depends if you want to ask people and if they're in your corner. So you should, like, innovation, if you want to be innovative, ask 10 people in their position what you should do. And they'll likely tell you their ideas. And if you can implement those ideas, you're innovative, Yeah. And so I learned really young to be resourceful that way. That's one thing. Two is that, making these big decisions, that's mentorship, free mentorship, by using people around me. Like there's a gentleman, Mike Garska, who's part of this business as well. And he was one of my dad's best friends. Being in the speaking industry, you access a lot of knowledge. And so my dad, has his own education. He's one of the most educated men I know. But then on top of that, he's got the education from being around speakers. Then same with Mike Garska. He's a consultant, a business consultant, always had a hand in teaching business. So yeah, I didn't really know it, but I've always been groomed to be a business person. Yeah. Yeah.
At the time, you can't see it though, right?
It's you don't see it at all. Yeah.
It's probably impossible. Like there's no way that somebody could like sit you down and say, this is your thing. Like you got to figure it out yourself.
You have to figure it out yourself and you have to put the work in. And so and going back to, do you recognize that you're different? You talk about entrepreneurship, like, if you can handle the workload, then you can be an entrepreneur. If you can't handle the hard decisions and the tough times, just be the number one employee. That's a beautiful place to be because, from my eyes, like there's been numerous times as an entrepreneur that you feel like quitting and you feel like giving up, and it's hard. And not many people to talk to about it either. But those decisions come from those who want it and those who want it the most. And I think that that's something that's lived through, is that I want the world and I dream of the world. I want a lot of things. And going back to impact, going back to my own lifestyle, going back to, reputation and all these things. Really, now that I'm getting older, it really just comes down into my purpose of what I'm good at. And I'm in service of these things that I create. And I can't be the one that's going to tap out in any way. So I think like all those things, again, just prepared me for really hard decisions and work ethic and, my dad having his own business as well. Yeah.
It's all these like, it's such a different way to learn, like I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but pretty tough, like childhood, like young, the first phase of your life is pretty tough. There's lots of things you had to figure out, bad situations. And that's one path, right? Another path could be people are just like, it just clicks all the way through, right?
Exactly.
80s, 90s, go to school, blah, 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 get the job. But it's like, it's a different way to get here.
I think that's one of the coolest things about entrepreneurship. And I think it's one of the coolest things about the speaking industry as well. Like, I couldn't be in a better role of where I'm at now because I'm in an industry where everybody is what I call 1% work ethic. You have to work your ass off to get to where you are. Two, you've accomplished something in your life. So you get to learn, like I get to learn about somebody who's like, had 3rd-degree burns over their whole body and survived that. I get to learn from a guy like Laval St. Germain, who's just like nonstop doing these things in his spare time, pilot by day, climbing Everest by night, and then you get to learn from like the people who teach the top companies' sales. You get to learn from people who are talking about robotics and AI in the future. I can keep up in all these conversations. And so, having those resources is just something that is like, it's instrumental.
Yeah.
And so everybody has their own path of education. Mine is completely unconventional. I choose to go through down hard times. Now, based off my past, I'm okay with making mistakes as long as they don't cost me a whole bunch of money. My time is very valuable. I understand that everybody's all about efficiency these days, and everybody's all about getting it right the first time and getting the right talent in the room and all those types of things. But again, I still do believe that hard work out trumps it all. And whether as long as you have the vision and dreams to get to where you want to go, can you put in 100 hours in a week? If you screw up and that cost you 30 hours that week, can you rebound and put another 30 hours the next week? Like that is that unstoppable force. Are you willing to do the things that other people aren't willing to do? Like, are you willing to be open on weekends? Are you willing to be open late at night? All those things are built into my mentality, into my unconventional path. But the willingness to learn, the curious ways to recreate, figuring out the analytics of how things work and where the gaps are, what's working well. These are part of things that I think a lot of people will go to school and get, they have words that they use that I don't know, but that I don't know, but I do, and I keep up in those conversations and I'm recognized for what I can do. So completely unconventional, but again, wouldn't change it. Wouldn't change it. Yeah.
It's that's why the show's cool for me, because it's refreshing to sit across from people like you that have this unconventional path. Yours was darker than mine, but mine's unconventional, right? It just didn't fit these traditional things. So, I think it's I love how you said it, just this unconventional path. I think it's a really cool message for people to hear, just because there's a different way to do it.
A different way to do it. And it comes through going through hard times.
Yeah.
Right? Like some people don't want to embrace those hard times. If you don't go through that hard time, you're not going to make the decision to get to where you are now.
Yeah.
Like it's just a complete roadblock into this little gap that opens. And did you go? And if you miss that gap, you're going to probably retract. And so that's kind of like the way that I look at it. And it's unconventional, but it's all about, I think being open-minded, curious, trying to figure out who you are. I'm trying to figure out who I am on a regular basis. I'm different people with different things at different times and how my mood is. But the one thing that is consistent is my work ethic. The one thing is consistent is that what you're going to get with me when you bring something to me or when you want me to respond. How I'm going to react. And I think it's very, very important to have that foundation.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for that foundation, then that brings you down to the new path. And then once you find that, then you know that this is your purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like sabbatical. You're like your year tour.
Yeah.
Was it a time for you? Was it a good time, or was it required?
Another education in itself. If you haven't traveled, you need to travel. That's an education in itself. Learning new languages, understanding what it's like, for other people in other countries, learning new foods, whatever that may be, whatever your thing is. Like if you have a thing, let's say you paraglide, go paraglide in another country. Go see what it's like for them. Go compare yourself to what you're doing and to what other people are doing. That's an education in itself. And I feel like that's part of who I am today. I still take 2 months off a year and work nomadically a year, cool. Just to get that feel. There's your brain tingles when you're being stimulated this way. When you're learning a new language, your brain tingles. There's different parts of your brain that are working that don't work otherwise, and more creativity comes. And this is all proven in studies, but it's something that you feel and live. I think it's such a super important part of my identity.
Yeah.
When you meet somebody who's traveled, you kind of just get things that some other people might not if they haven't. Yeah.
Then I'm not going to get shit from you.
Exactly.
I don't try.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's not that. It's like a common understanding of being humble. I think like that comes from that, or it could come from hardship as well. But I think like a common understanding of that. There's bigger things out there than me and you. Yeah, I've gone through all these things and whatever. There's bigger things, people talk to me saying, hey, you should be a speaker. And it's like, hey, like, I could be a speaker, but my job is to connect people to speak who've done bigger things than what Gordon's done. Yeah, I have a story and all these things, and maybe that's my pathway down the road. But for now, I'm an expert at connecting people that have already lived their truth and gone further down their path than I have. And that's such an important thing to know. Yeah.
Which is an interesting spot, hey? Like when you because you've accomplished things, you're at a point, but then the people you're around are just like up a tier, right? So it keeps you kind of humble, gives you perspective, and then kind of just like keeps you grounded.
Keeps me grounded, but it allows me to keep up, and strive for more. Yeah, 100% both. Yeah, 100% both. And I think like, again, like, like we deal with a lot of high level celebrities, but we also deal with like, the people who are upcoming. And I think like the best thing that I can say is that when people have lost their humbleness, their ego is taken over. And as a person, I strive for that never to happen. Like we all get egotistical. Yep. We all have this edge to us. Or I think a lot of people do. Anyway, I have an edge to me a little bit, but at the same time too, like understanding where you come from. Like my dad had Speakers Bureau of Alberta, who dealt with Alberta companies since 1999. A lot of those organizations weren't the $30,000, $40,000 fee. We're not going to say goodbye to them. Those are our bread and butter, but those are also our hardship relationships that my dad has spent 30 years building. We don't want to forget who we are as people. And I think, thinking of going back and dealing with different celebrities and all those things, and I understand why they get there. I think a lot of people would not understand why they get there, but I've understood that, when you're asked for money all the time, or you're asked, something's always needed of you, that can become detrimental to your ego or fueling to your ego, but it also becomes detrimental to your soul. Yeah. And I get it, but it's your job to keep your spirit alive of understanding the why of what you did or are doing. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah.
After your little travel hiatus, what was the next part of your path?
That's the next big one. So come back from traveling, big things. So I'm coming back. I got all these business ideas. I got all these things that I'm willing.
Brains tingling?
Oh yeah. Brains tingling. wanting to keep going. I had sold my business. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go back to school and whatnot. So out of interest, I take sociology. And this is completely contradicting to every single relationship that I had in my life. Every single person was like, what the hell are you doing? Why would you be taking sociology? Only a couple girls were like, hey, yeah, sociology, So I took sociology, and it was just out of interest. And to be quite frank honest, I got kind of sick of not knowing how things worked. So you get to understand, in sociology, it's really interesting, you get to understand the history of politics and the history of government and the history of health, the history of the knowledge, the history of philosophy, how philosophy turned into systems and process, and how that turned into the why and what of what we do. And so that was kind of an interesting thing to me. It was just kind of what really interested me. And my whole life had been psychology. Hey, you're doing this. This is your fault. This is your problem. Your decisions, your brain is making this. This is the repercussion of your brain's decision, which is all completely conventional and understandable. But then, sometimes we forget about the environment. And I kind of brought that up earlier. The environment is so important. And so you can have all the biological attributes to win a gold medal. But if you don't have the environment to train for that gold medal, the chances of you winning that gold medal just went down to like 5% probably. Don't quote me on that, but that's kind of how it works. So that's what really interested me there. So I did 3 years of that. And, I was the oldest person in the class, sometimes the only white guy in the class, sometimes the only male in the class. I learned another really important part was I learned about what was happening in Indigenous communities. I mean, here you are, like I don't know, what your education was like, but like I didn't all I heard about residential schools was from people that I had come across that didn't really tell their full truth because they didn't have a safe place to tell it.
Yeah.
I learned about like the Indian Act, and I learned about like residential school system, and I learned about like colonialism, and like started learning about all these histories, and then realizing like all these interactions that I had with Indigenous people from the past, and how they all kind of just started clicking to better understand, why of where we're at in that conversation. So that was a big learning curve. I'm a white male with three boys. I didn't know the best way to treat women. I wasn't bad. I had girlfriends my whole life and all these things. But again, I just didn't know what girls went through in their lives. I think that was another important part of my growth. Then like not understanding as a person that's not having, I had a buddy who was black, and he applied to 160 different places to get a job and couldn't get a job. Like, you don't hear those stories in everyday conversations. And so I'm born and raised Calgary. I love Calgary. I think Calgary is also one of the most diverse cities out there. And part of that educational piece and going to sociology was, trying to understand my role in Calgary, especially because Calgary's got, we all know, we have the really far right wing, and we have far left wing, and extreme versions. But then there's a lot of people that are in the middle, and I'm trying to find my middle of what that meant to me. And sociology really brought that full circle. Because I feel like everybody wants to be in the middle when it comes to those conversations, but I finally figured out what my role was. I think like sometimes as we're trying to take over the conversation, it's not my conversation. I realized that, again, I'm really good at connecting people to have that conversation. And it was really, really important part of our hiring that we had that kind of, representation of different people doing different things. I think it's really, really important. Yeah.
Your mind was really open, hey? When you decided to go down this path, you must have been in a pretty interesting spot.
Very. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. It was hard to be around me, I think, as a friend. Yeah. I think, again, that pulled in different directions. Like here's Gord. Gord's going to go take sociology. Like, what? Why? Was he turning soft on us? Whatever, On the other side of that, what fuels me, going back to my dad's philosophy degree, is that curiosity of what could be different. Or why are we doing this? What is decisions that I'm making because of this? Is this because somebody's taught this to me? Is this because this is what I want? Do I want this because that was taught? Like, all these really deep questions. And I've always been a super deep person. So
shared it? Did you ever share that? Or did you always know that? Or was it just very you kept it inside you?
I shared it very young. I've had a lot of courage, like being goalie, being I wasn't afraid to speak my mind. And in contrast to what other people think and feel like, and now that I'm older, I know that you think a lot of the same things I think. I know that we could walk down the street and another guy, he's thinking the same things I think. I know that there's a lot of commonalities with the way we are as humans. But I had to develop that from a young age. I had to develop that open mindset, that creativity to how to make money, or creativity on how to survive, or creativity how to trick the people who are trying to get me in shit. Like, you get all these different creativity levels. So you have to be open and not judgmental to how that information's coming in. It doesn't matter how it's coming in. You just want the information. And so I think that, along with my dad, those two concepts really focused me into an understanding of that, the world's your oyster, that optimistic, that type of mentality. But what comes with that is also what do I want from it? Yeah. And that open mind of how to be open to receive it. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Totally. You have to go down that path at whatever age, but
Yeah, I'd say that really opened up for me, or when I started becoming a man, around when I started disassociating with people, I started making better decisions. No longer were the trauma bonding's at a lower point. You're no longer having to need people for recognition. Now that took me probably till I was about 28 to really understand that I was doing things for other people, to get recognition from other people. But at that age, you know, I think like becoming a man, you start understanding like, hey, it's okay for me to make this decision. Like, and who the hell are they going to say? You know, I'm just going to keep going with it. And people say not to care about other people's think. I mean, like 100%, but we all care about what other people think. And so how are you going to internalize that in a way that is that you can also become external with it? I don't know if that makes sense. Like, how can I internalize this and also it still be my truth without offending somebody, but also on the other side of that, without, you know, I don't know how to say it, without offending my friends, without not feeling like a man enough, without not offending my father and going back against things that I had committed to. But most importantly, it comes down to my truth. And so I've always realized that, and my dad is again, man, like he's just unreal. Like he's just, the truth is the fastest way out of any problem. The truth. Just go with the truth. Nobody can say anything. Even if they judge you for it, live the truth. So that has just been another great influence when it comes to those things. It's just unreal. I don't even know where he gets it from, because it's like he grew up in this small little town, you know, under, you know, I would say not like middle class, below middle class, no, all these big values and stuff. And I asked him the other day, I said, where do you get that from? And he said, oh, I went to Catholic school and they forced me. Yeah. So, oh, okay. Yeah. Like something I can't relate with, but hey, you know, he's just got this amazing morale. And that's also part of that journey of just like doing the right thing. And even in shit, even as I was doing bad things, doing the right thing as best I could. Yeah.
After you finish your sociology piece,
didn't get to finish it. So my dad, so third year sociology, you know, I was also going through it. Sociology really threw me for a ringer. It did.
Your mind was
my
reeling?
mind. Yeah, my mind. It was really hard to be friends with certain people after you realize certain things. It's also really hard to hear certain narratives. Like, I don't care what extreme you're on. I can't listen to extremism of anything. I have to listen to some sort of thing that takes the other person's side into account. So it's really difficult me in that sense. But third year, Dad gets sick. And so once he got sick, I moved up to Edmonton, and basically his sickness was not just a little thing. So he was married at the time. He went through heart surgery. So another, just one of these trifecta bombs that went off in our lives. He was married. He had a heart surgery. After heart surgery, after 4 days of that, the woman that he was with, the married with, she also left right after that. A week later, and so I go up there, for a couple of days. I come back down. Week later, he's got a fire in his apartment, and a huge fire setting off in his systems, and everything was on fire. The electrical outlet, all this stuff. So it's huge hazard, and he's disabled, right? And so I go back up there. I literally started sleeping on his floor and taking care of him. And you know, it's hilarious. Like, just my dad, he's got 15 people in his house, smoke protectors, whatever you call them, like cleaning all the smoke damage stuff out. And he's working, you know, he's got his computer. Don't touch my computer, let me work. And I looked at him, I'm like, are you now I just see myself in him because I get it. But like, are you nuts? And like, so anyways, like, but that transition, we went into the hospital, and that's when I basically just started helping him with the business, doing all the bookings for the emails, the events. I was starting taking, like, he didn't have anything on a cloud. We had to bring his computer into the hospital, plug it in, and use the phone. And I said, this is just painful, man. We had TELUS email. You couldn't access it on your phone or something like that. You only had so many access, like just all the access points. But basically that was a 4 months thing just in that. And then after 2 months, I kept going back and up and down back from here, Calgary to Edmonton. And then he said, like, hey, like, I'm at my ends with this. Do you want it? You know, and we just happen to own the Speakers Bureau of Canada domain, www.speakerscanada.com. And he's owned that I don't know, he wanted to do that since he was young, just never had the energy for it. And he said, let's go with that if you're open to it. So, you know, 2 older brothers, they weren't, you know, one of them was like, yeah, go for it. I don't want to do it. The other one said, hey, I think he was Pat, the middle one, why didn't I do it? Why couldn't I get that? You know, because he was in transition of his job. But I think looking back, we all agree that I was the best person for it at that time. Like I could put full-time hour in. I had to work part-time, kept all the money in the company. So that transition though was really, really hard in our lives. But yeah, basically just taking, you know, that set into launching Speakers Canada, I had the choice, do I go back and finish sociology? Do I do the degree? And my dad again said, like, what the hell are you going to do with a sociology degree? And I
fair question.
In today's market, yeah, I agree. You know, and it just happened. Everything just kind of clicked from there. Yeah,
that hard work piece.
Yeah,
you know, like it's almost like you're almost set up to handle that kind of work, right? The up and down.
Yeah,
all the just like figuring it out, and then.
Yeah, I think like entrepreneurship's not built for everybody, and I think like you know, I thought, what is the statistic? Like 91% of entrepreneurs do not reach success, and then you think about it, like, what does success mean in an entrepreneurship? Did you grow it to a small company? Did it become $1 billion company? Like everybody can define what that is in their own way, but you know, like for me, yeah, like I can handle it. That's number one.
Yeah.
And like I've had speakers and people call me and like check on my mental health and check on my wellness, and like, don't get me wrong, man, like there's been some really hard times, and but you know, like I do this because I love it. I do it because I the work, like 70 hours work a week is normal to me, minimum. That's minimum. I can push like 120 if I need to for months at a time. Like a couple of crisis times where like 110 to 120 hours a week for 4 to 6 months to keep the business alive in the middle of our biggest growth period. Like we have a lot of really crazy stories that we've been through, learning things the hard way, right? It's not like could have had paid somebody to come in and say, hey, hire this person, or go hire this person at 200,000 who's been in the industry for years. But I just don't. I choose the unconventional. You might think that it's stupid. You might think that it's wrong, but that's what I choose out of choice, because those hard lessons become innovation. Yeah.
You said your dad had that domain for years. It was kind of like the Canada thing was just like in the back of his head.
Yeah.
However, you know, maybe he thought he was going to get to it eventually, but whatever his idea was, for him to see it kind of come alive now, for you guys to like dust it off and push it forward.
Yeah.
Do you guys get to talk about that very much?
Oh man, I talk to my dad every day, and my dad's, as you guys can tell, is like my.
There's a common theme here.
He's my hero, man. But yeah, no, he's helped me so much, and I talk to him every single day, and like we've had weeks that were bigger than his years, and so I think like again like. I was just at an event the other day, and somebody introduced me, and they said, "Oh, couldn't be more different than his dad." And I didn't know how to take it. I said, you know, it's like, because my dad's such an amazing person to me, but my dad is just so goddamn caring that business was business for him. Like he used to work with speakers way more intimately and give them an hour a day, talking to them on a regular basis. I'm like, well, if I'm not booking you as a speaker, then what's the point of our relationship, right? And so, but the blend of us both, like to share that together has been like one of the most honorable things that I think I could have ever done as a son. Most importantly, it's been just such a gift. Like I wouldn't even know where I'd be without him. And the business gives us both commonality and purpose. And so we haven't even started on where we actually want to go with this thing. And that's the wild thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's such a, it's so, I just find it fascinating how like connected the two of you are, you know, like, and just, but how it's early days, it's like, you know, it's not all kumbaya and like.
No. And it never is kumbaya. We have a really weird relationship. Like.
What's it built on? Like respect or like.
It's built out of love. It's built on love. It's built on love. It's as simple as to say that we both love each other. We both understand each other through and through. He knows everything about me. I know everything about him. We're honest with each other. It's like one of those like connections that you can just be yourself, even if you're mad, and you just get over it, you know? And it's like going through a father-son business transfer is hard, like especially generation to generation. Like when I asked for all my agreement, like, where's all our previous customers? He handled me 4 filing cabinets of agreements that were paper, you know? So it's like, it's not easy, right? Hey dad, where's our contact list? Don't have it. You know, like all these things that you'd think a normal business would have. So we fought a lot at the first while. But it comes out of compassion for one another, for love and respect is second, or respect would be second, but love is the number one thing that we can get through. And then I think on the other side of that is the impact. We both know what this company does. When we give speeches to our own staff, or we are talking to speakers and hiring them, and we're talking to clients and what we're doing, it's about impact. It's like, what an honor to have a business where we can employ people, employ our lives, and have an impact without it having to be called a social enterprise or anything like that. And so what a cool thing on our side. So I think that vision of impact is what keeps us driven as well. Yeah, especially in his age, because you know, when you get older, you need things to dream about. Yeah.
Could you have ever seen yourself in this spot?
Never.
Like
never.
Like the idea of, you know, working side by side with your dad, you know, pushing the business in a different direction. Like
never.
Ever like until you're like, until it's right in front of you.
Yeah.
And it's presented to you, you're like, okay, it's time.
Yeah. When I took the business over, our accountant at the time said, why do you want this business? It wasn't making money. It wasn't profitable, and it was a long journey forward. And I didn't know if I wanted it or not. And that brought us together even closer. But before that, I didn't want the business. I wanted to finish my degree in sociology, and I wanted to start another business on my own. Actually, I wanted to do imported exporting, you know, and doing kind of like what they call drop shipping. I had my own idea. It was my own strategy of, you know, test 15 shirts on the market, see which one sells, buy 100 of them, sell them, move on to the next product. You know, I had that kind of attitude of the way I wanted to do business. But, you know, once this business came into my lap, and you really get to see what the speakers do, and you realize that you're around, like I felt at home. I felt like I was around the right people. And that's more of the why. And than anything else I had at the time.
It's a very interesting spot to be surrounded by these spectacular humans.
It's unbelievable.
Like I don't like their stories, whether it's, you know, trauma, or whether it's just accomplishments, or just their energy of how they think and how they move and what their message is. Like it's gotta gotta rub off on you a little bit.
It's crazy. The first conference I went to for speakers, it's all like a Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, like an association, and I didn't want to. I was like, man, this is a lot of work. Like to do a booking for one email, it's like 30 emails. Like you lose your why. You're trying to figure out your why. Like, why would I do this? For what profit? And you know, you're trying to figure that out. I went to this conference, and like, you know, there's a girl who's 72 and she's using Twitter and making videos and stuff. And then you realize like all these people are in competition with one another, and they're just high energy, laughing, having fun. So like, again, going back to that high energy work ethic, you feel at home. That's number one. Two, then you get all these people who are touching these different markets, and they all came there from different ways. Like you can have somebody who went through hardships, like a similar story to mine, or you have somebody who was addicted to drugs, and then they you know, their whole lives, and they came out of it. You know, that could be one angle. Then you have somebody who's so successful in business, like you know, Arlene Dickinson, you know, in that sense. Or you have another one who's an athlete, an Olympic athlete that won, or an Olympic athlete that failed. You could have both, you know, and it kind of goes into this realm of the people who have figured it out. No matter what, they figured it out. Whether that was a passion of theirs, whether that was a purpose of theirs, whether that was an accomplishment, they have figured something else out that some of us have not. And so I felt more at home, because I also felt like have figured some stuff out, but I have so much more to figure out. And so it's just a beautiful space of unlimited education and unlimited access to these people. Like if I need to know anything, I'm one phone call away. Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
it's like a fascinating collection of humans, you know, that
so interesting.
And that all are, I don't know, they're just kind of moving in a similar way, you know?
Exactly.
They might have like some different nuances, but
yeah,
whatever that thing is that propels them.
100%, 100%. And some people, you know, everybody does it for different reasons. And like, I'm sure you've been to a speech before. You just held a conference, right?
Yeah.
You know, everybody goes to these conferences for different reasons. Everybody speaks for different reasons. But the one thing that is measurable is impact.
Yeah.
And so the one thing is measurable is the influence and the impact. And so that is the main thing of where I come from on it. But these people, like, it's like, again, going back to Laval, it's like, dude, man, like you, an airplane pilot by day, you've biked across the safari, you're the only person to bike, you know, climb a mountain and ski down it in Iraq, like all these things, whatever, you know, I'm sorry, Laval, if I got anything wrong in there, but like, you know, there's that. And then like, you know, we have another speaker like Dr. James McCocus, and then he's an Indigenous leader. And like my dad hired his mother like 15 years ago. And was just to get the word out of what was going on in Indigenous communities.
Yeah.
And this was before the conversation was there. Well, Dr. James McCocus, he ended up winning the Amazing Race with Anthony Johnson, his partner. This happened coincidingly with our company growth, like second year that we got into the company. All of a sudden they won the Amazing Race. All of a sudden everybody knew of this Two-Spirit First Nation doctor in a First Nation community, pardon me, who's just an unbelievable person and thought leader for the communities, for the audiences, for the medical communities. Like, so I get to learn all these things that he's doing. And like, you know, I don't know if you've heard the theory of like, just like everything lining up, like hard work, luck, and hard work, luck, and timing. And like, if you don't have one of those things, it doesn't happen. Like you can do all of them, but if one thing doesn't happen at different times when the other is happening, it doesn't happen. And so he was one of those pivotal moments as well. Again, I wouldn't be able to represent him without have gone to sociology.
Totally.
I wouldn't be able to deal with the conversation. So all these little decisions that kind of just, it's been, you know, very in symmetry of my path. And therefore I just kind of know what I'm doing. And it's just, and then then when I know my role and that I'm supposed to represent these people, man, like, again, you get to learn more from them of what they're doing. So it's reciprocal. Yeah.
It's got to, does it ever feel exhausting to be around that 100%. Energy and just like, cause it's like, it can be I'm guessing it'd be like an onrush of like lots of good, and then you got to deal with it because there's volume.
We've had people quit because they think like, oh, I'm so sorry, you guys deal with all the bullshit. You know, at the same time too, like that's what we do. You know, like it's work, man. And like any entrepreneur knows that, like if you avoid things, you're screwed, man. Like you got to go right at it. And like, that's probably one of my best skills is handling conflict in high pressure, just based off my own story. So again, just the synergy of all that. And can it be a lot? I think like the number one thing for me is I have to try to stay off social media as much as I can. It's really easy to compare yourself. And like when you're servicing others and you're trying to service others, it's really easy to feel like you're not doing enough. So you get like calls like, hey, like, what have you done for me lately? Or, hey, like you missed this detail. This really screwed me up. And you know, those mistakes, you're playing with people's lives. There's 100,000 people a year that speaker's touching. You don't want to mess with that statistic. You want that statistic to be very clear, and you want to enable them to do their job properly. So we have to take those things on personally. Even though it's a business thing, you have to be really good at trying to brush things off. And that's just not who I am. I take things personally in the best way. And I'm learning that skill as I go. But we're dealing with humans, and we don't have a product, right? We're dealing with humans.
So crazy, man. It's just like, it's, I obviously I know a few people on your roster because they've come through here. So I just can't imagine that at scale.
The personalities,
and just like, but even just like getting into real conversations, right? Like, you know, what's their purpose? What's their why? Because that's going to be a big part of like what they present and talk about, right?
Why they speak.
And then as you hear that, you're like, wow, I'm sure at one point you're like, how did you figure this out It's impressive to hear somebody articulate in a very succinct manner. It's like, just got to just like fill you up.
It's twofold. Because if they know your job better than you at something, you hear about it. But that's a good thing. That's a good thing, right? You have to be able to keep you on your toes, and you have to be able to take critical feedback. And that's something that I had to learn, how to take positive, constructive feedback or negative feedback and turn it into gold. That's like a huge skill. But yeah, like just being around their energy and learning like what they do. I really like love, and I think I've said this before, is just what I love is like when I've met people and they've reached some level of success, but they remained that humble person. That just means the world to me. And I think that there's such a misunderstanding of people that they think that there's some like, once they get successful, that there's some competitive edge, that they're not going to talk to me and those types of things. I think like that's of course there to a certain degree, but when you see them work their magic, it's so touching. And we always have the philosophy that if you can change one person through our speaker at an event, we're making an impact. And our mission statement for the company, it's not really on our website or anything, but our mission for the company is how many people can we impact a year through our speakers? That's what we're trying to solve. How many Canadians can we touch through our speakers? And the more that we touch, the more people are changing. And so that's measurable. That's what we're trying to measure. So income comes, and all these things, but measurability is how many people we can touch. And that goes back to my dad's legacy and our family values. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This has been awesome, dude.
I appreciate it. Yeah, Jeff. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah.
I knew when we sat down at Analog there, and I was like, no, there's you were alluding to it a couple of times, and I didn't pry because I didn't want to hear it on the sidewalk, but I knew there was a story behind kind of why you operate the way you do and what your purpose is. So to actually sit here and listen to it and just like feel it, it makes so much sense. So.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And like, being a Calgary story, like it's an honor to be on your program with your guests and being a Calgary story, like I big YYC shout out to all the business owners here and what we do. And I just really appreciate you shedding light and bringing us all on here as well.
Of course. I end the show with one question. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
Business, right away. Business. I if you're okay with me expanding,
of course.
I think I just came back from Toronto. A lot of our businesses are moving out there, and vice versa. There's La Ciel that just opened up on 17th Ave. That's an Ontario company. Like there's a lot of relation to big city stuff of what we're doing, and I just really respect our Alberta mentality. The way that we approach business, the way that the business owners are, the connectability of everybody, the accessibility that we access, and the recognition, recognition that we can look across and go, no, we know who those guys are and why they do what they do, and we respect what they do. And it's really easy to access that. I think like big cities, they get lost of, well, you're just another one of those companies. And here it's you're one of those companies, but you're our company. And I really love that. So again, just thank you for bringing all these business people here and sharing their story, and not even just them, but just showing and highlighting like the best parts about our city. And just love it. Yeah.
Thanks for doing this, man.
Appreciate it, Jeff. Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
It's going to be fun to watch your trajectory because I kind of have a sneaky feeling you have some plans. So I'm pumped that we're connected. And thanks again for your time.
Appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you.